One person did a found piece of art, which I think is quite lovely. It's in the rare books cabinet as you go into the library. So there were some people that once they kind of got it, it's like, the first couple of months, really, the first couple of months were kind of, for me. And I didn't tell that to anybody, but it was just so hard to try to get people to think in non-literal ways, or to even entertain the idea of thinking in non-literal ways. And I was very discouraged, and I went away, not because of that, but for other reasons. And when I came back, I don't know, but some kind of miracle happened, because I walked into the studio, and I saw all of these beautiful, abstract images that were expressive and colorful and full of symbolism and non-representational symbolism, not too many hearts and crosses, but relationship between colors and lines and spaces and shapes. And it's like, I can't believe this. And so I sort of got revived by that. And at that point, I could see that people really were starting to get it. And I think the pivot, or from what I read with the interviews, one of the pivots at least, was a demonstration by an artist, Barbara McLean, who had an exhibition here, who is an abstract painter, and she does really, really large abstract works. And she kind of came in and she did her thing, and people were kind of oohing and awing over that, and rightly so. And then someone asked the question, what does it mean? And Barbara said, well, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. And that was kind of profound for some of the students. What are you talking about? And she said, well, I don't really know. It's just like how do you know when it's finished? Well, you feel. When it says to me what I feel it needs to say, then I know it's finished. And those are not easy things to understand if you've not been exposed to that a lot. But they had been exposed. They'd had a little bit of work on color theory and some very basic design things and so on and so on. And that, more than anything else, I think, seemed to really sort of give them permission to let go. Give them permission to let go of the traditional ways of thinking. I mean, original sin is not a really easy thing to start with, to do visual art projects with people who have no background in using the materials. I mean, theologically, it's kind of a difficult one, and artistically, it's a difficult one, too. So I think they did a great job in the exhibition. But they really struggled with that. And they struggled in ways different from doing a research paper, because I know that. I've done enough research papers. So they had to grapple with their own ideas and the contrast that often brought up with what David had given them as readings. And these were people, they were all MDiv students. And so they know that they have to deal with this at some level, because that's going to be an issue that's going to come up at some point, whether it's through counseling or whatever in their ministry. So, there were even tears. It's a difficult thing to grapple with.
I'm curious about the polarization you're making between art.
The what?
Polarization.
Polarization.
Between art and doing theology, because I imagine theology is a creative process.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if, I'm interested in the possibility of doing art and then going back to, the written word and seeing what that will do for it. And, this project didn't do that, but would that change the way people did theology?
That's a really loaded question, and I don't have a pen, so I can't write everything down, so you just bring up what I miss, okay? Because I will miss stuff. But what you're describing there is a hermeneutic circle. So you do the art, the experiential, as long as you're not starting out with a concept and you want to illustrate it. That's where we started mainly with the original sin class was, okay, now how do I illustrate this? And that's the hum. that you have to get over. So if you don't start with that, if you start with just the pure experience of creating, and then you reflect upon it, and then you go back and maybe you create something else, but you don't fix the thing that you've just created. You allow, it's more like a hermeneutic spiral, all right, so that you pick up what you learn. And if you do this a lot, if you're a full-time artist, for example, it becomes second nature because your intuition becomes informed by this theological reflection that you do on the work. So I don't see it as a polarization. I see it as there is an object of study, God. And we can come at it seems like a polarization, but we don't stay out there. We're trying to do the same kind of thing in different ways. And at present, the way things are set up in seminaries, we don't have a situation where we can learn for these things to interact. We have a couple of courses that integrate art, and I'm really grateful for those. But I think we need more. And I don't think it's just a matter of throwing in some art here and there. I think that we need some courses that actually integrate the art experience into theology and into the practice of ministry. So I don't see it as a polarization. Now, I also write poetry, and I know that some of you write poetry. And when I do that, like in the books that I've done that have poems and images in them, I have not used the painting to illustrate the poem, and I have not used the poem to illustrate the painting. What I've done is usually the painting has come first, and because it's a book, I thought it should have some text. What I would do is try to get in the same mental state, try to go back to where I was, and then just use the medium of words instead of paint. So it's not, and theology can be creative. Can be incredibly creative, but you can only go as far as your tools will let you go. And if you're limited by theological restrictions, then you're limited by those restrictions. And it's like writing a sonnet. Sonnet is a wonderful form of poetry. But it sets its limitations, you know those up front, and you work within that. Free verse allows you to, it doesn't mean it's like a free-for-all, but it allows you to evolve a form and content at the same time. So it's, different ways of doing things.
Okay, and just a follow-up question. You're talking about like the challenge for people who've never done art to learn to do art. I'm just wondering, is there another way that you could do it? Like have them read art? Like would that have a similar...
As spectators, you mean?
Yeah, but would it enable them to think non-literally or kind of get into a creative space?
I think so. I think that can be done. As an artist, it's hard for me to put myself into that space. But I know that Alda Faber teaches a film course, and there's just no way you're going to, approach the films that she shows from a literal perspective because it's just not going to work. So I think that, through that process as a spectator, you're not actually making art, but you're being exposed to a different form, a different kind of artistic expression. So I think that, that you're right, that you can do that. It just hasn't been my experience so much to do that. But I think that the experience that I'm talking about making art and the going into the zone, or whatever words you want to put around that, that requires more than what spectatorship I think can offer. And that is debatable, but I think it's necessary to go in and to use the hands and to just sort of let go. And so I was going to say something else about that, but gone. It'll come back. Over here. Oh.
Yes, I just want to make a statement. I believe that many people feel that the expression of their doubts is leads to strengthening of the faith, and that this is usually done verbally or in writing. However, I see such a liberating effect in the art image, in expressing our doubts through art.
Yes, and art therapy, right? I mean, that's a really good example of what you're talking about, I think, where people use imagery to get at things that they just, struggle with. Yes, thank you. I agree with that. And it's really interesting that when you teach workshops on non-objective painting, how when people make that switch that I was talking about, that flow, when they get in there, they can create, I mean, you are literally, I hate using that word, you are creating a space, a world, and you go in there and you do not know what's going to happen when you're in there. Because if you go in there with an idea, that's a whole different process. So you have to have a certain level of trust. You have to trust. I can remember when I was much younger and my theology was much different, I can remember thinking, I'm afraid to go in there because, it's very dark. I was having these dreams that were, some of the paintings that I was doing at the time were leaves and vines and very positive. And in my dreams, the colors would be reversed and the directions and so on. And it was scary. And I had the thought that, the unspoken thought, that suggested that it's okay. Do you really want to have a God that can't, relate to this? I mean, is your fear that great that you don't trust God enough to allow you to enter the darkest of places? I mean, St. John of the Cross, right? The dark night of the soul. One of the things I love about that work is that St. John says you go into the darkness, but you can't look back. If you look back at that light that's behind you, you will never experience that other light. You have to go in through that darkness, being willing to commit to it, and even with the idea that you may never come back. In order to get to that other kind of space, and that can be very scary, especially at first. So, okay.
I work at NASCAD, so I'm coming at it from a fine art perspective. I'm curious about what references you had with which to teach the students, given that Christian themes haven't been dominant in fine art since the Enlightenment. So maybe some names or examples, and also how you feel about the danger of elevating bad art because it has Christian themes and having the equivalent of Christian rock
loaded.
Deborah,
do you have a pen? Seriously, does someone have a pen that I can? Because my memory, I'm at that age where the memory, I can't really trust it. You have a pen. Thank you, sir. Does it work? Oh, I like pencils better. Is that a pencil?
That's a pen.
Pencil? Yeah, they're non-committal. Whereas, with pens, okay. I'm not, I only have 7 minutes left, so I can't do that justice. But I will say a few things. To the first part of your question, think of Rothko and think of icons. Now, David's gone, I guess, but in one of his classes, I decided to do work on icons and just got thoroughly absorbed by that. And the idea of going into the icon and it's not worship of, it's a direction beyond itself. And Rothko's work is a really good example of iconic work. And that simply means that the surface is flat, it offers you no idea of a literal interpretation. He works with color fields and quite beautiful works, but they point to a world beyond the surface. And I remember reading somewhere when I was working on the icons, look at the difference between a very early icon, not even the 14th century, but the 4th, 5th century icons. Look at one of those Theotokos icons and compare that to a Raphael Madonna. So the older icons, they are not meant to be pretty, and we consider them pretty now because they're in museums and galleries, and so they're art. But they are a genre in terms of the art world, and you and I talked a little bit about the art world. Deborah might have more to say about that, more direct experience too with that. But what I'm getting at is that they are They are windows